Okay, so let's look at a sample answer. We're going to look at an answer to the question that relates to the Rosabelle text. So just to remind you of what the question was, you need to focus on the part of this part of your answer on the second part of the source from line 19 to the end. So that means that most of your answer is going to be about the part of the extract which is set in the hat shop. That doesn't mean you can't mention things that happened before, as long as you're mainly focusing on the part from line 19 to the end. But you can make reference to the opening about her having to go without food in order to buy the flowers, because that might well be relevant to the answer you want to give. So this part of the story, set in the hat shop, shows that the red-haired girl has many advantages in life, and I think Rosabelle is right to be angry. To what extent do you agree? So the plan for this answer is you're going to have a first line. Do you agree completely or partially disagree? Say so. Then you're going to do 3 paragraphs, depending on what you're focusing on. You can give one reason why you agree. You're going to say because of this, this, and this, with a quote or a line number. And you're going to do that in paragraph 1, 2, and 3. You may have a third reason why you agree, or one why you partially disagree. But for each of the points you make, you need to have a quote or a line number in order to evidence that your ideas are linked to the text and that they have evidence in the text to support them. And then an optional paragraph 4, a conclusion, where you sum up your reasons for agreeing or partially disagreeing, because that can add sophistication. You giving your argument, trying to show why you understand that these things have happened in this particular piece of writing, and that you understand why the writer is doing what they're doing. And this is where you can put in your own ideas or knowledge if you think they're useful in helping you to show that you're understanding. Or you can use a lens through which to look at the text and provide evidence of how well you understand what you think the writer is trying to do. And those lenses are such things as the political, the feminist, the historical, or knowledge and ideas that you actually have from your own life or from your own studies. So I'm going to show you a sample answer. And hopefully you can all see that. You've got A, B, C, D, E. Those are all paragraphs. Can you see those? Anybody?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. But I have muddled them up. They are not in the right order. They're completely disordered. What I want you to do is have a read of them and decide what order you want to put these paragraphs in. What order should they be in based on your understanding of what we've been talking about, how to arrange and answer this question? So I'm going to give you up to 10 minutes to think about what order you want to put these into. So if you think B is the first one, you can put B, C, D, A, and just put that into the chat. So I don't want to put pressure on you, but I started getting answers in the chat this afternoon at around about the 6 or 7 minute range. So I'm looking at 6, 7 minutes, up to 10 minutes for everybody to give me, an order that you think these paragraphs should be in, just with the letters in the chat. Is that okay? Everybody know what they're doing?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, then off you go.
Claim, are we putting this in order or choosing the right one?
I'm asking you to put them in order, and
No.
obviously, yeah, put them in order. You just have to. So in chat, just put, you know, B, C, D, F, or whatever you think it should be. Okay. Obviously, you'll find out whether it's the right order afterwards.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Just what you think is the right order.
Okay.
That's good. You've obviously taken it to heart and you're being faster than the afternoon group. So I'll give you a few more minutes for everybody else, but we're getting some good answers. Nazia, you've only given 3 paragraphs. Remember, you've got to find an order for all of those paragraphs need to be in the answer. So there's definitely going to be 5.
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
I'm working on the last 2.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Graham, my chat isn't working, so I can't see anyone's answers or put my
All
own
right.
in.
Your chat isn't working.
Oh,
Oh,
you're
I'm
done.
sorry. I'm sorry about that.
That's okay.
Maybe-
I don't know why.
Maybe when we get to the end, you can tell me yours verbally.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, that's
Okay.
fine.
So Paula, what did you think?
I've put C, A, E, D, D.
Right. So you're in with the majority here. So there seems to be a consensus that C is the beginning. Not everybody's gone for that, but and then E A D B or E A B D. I mean, there is some flexibility, but I hope that when we look at the answers, you'll see that quite clearly there's a definite beginning and there's a definite end, and then there is a progression with the other paragraphs. Maybe they could move in the order, but there's a definite beginning and an end, and I hope you can see that when we look at the actual answers. So I'm going to stop sharing that one, and we're going to look at the answers now. Thank you for that work. I think most people are on the same lines. Let's just see what the actual order is. And it's the actual order because this is the way that a student wrote this answer. It's not necessarily saying it's the best order, and maybe the order you put them in was better. But I think there is a definite opening and an ending. So on the page that you should now be able to see, you've got the question, and then you've got the paragraphs, but with red labeling on. I hope you can all see that. Do tell me if you can't.
Yes, it's visible.
Thank you. So the beginning, the first one is this short one. I agree up to a point that Rosabelle is right to be angry. However, I also feel that she unfairly judges the red-haired girl. Now, this student says that they agree up to a point. So up to a point means that they disagree partially. Because if you only agree up to a point, there is some part of it that you don't agree with. They haven't mentioned in this opening line the other part of the question, which is, does the red-haired girl have many advantages in life? But I'm not suggesting that this is a perfect answer. It is a good answer, but it's not perfect, as you'll definitely see. But that would be the first opening line. Okay. So then we have paragraph 1, which gives one reason why you agree with a quote or a line number. Or with, as you can see here, she or he uses more than one quote, which is allowed as well. Rosabelle is a poor shop worker whereas the red-haired girl has so many advantages. So this paragraph brings in the advantages and it contrasts the position between them in terms of class. So a poor shop worker versus a redhead versus a woman with many advantages. We can see this because, that important word, when Rosabelle buys the flowers, she has to have so little tea. But these, the flowers, are her only compensation for having to work in a shop selling really expensive hats that she could never afford. She sees the red-haired girl get out of a carriage. Now, carriage is in quotes because it's the word that's in the text, so it counts as a quote. Whereas she has to go on the bus. They can so easily afford the hats and all the nice things in life that Rosabelle cannot. I must have that, says the girl, yes, which shows that she can just have what she wants. So this paragraph, although a little bit confused, is talking about the difference in status, the difference in ability to buy things between Rosabelle and the red-haired girl and her boyfriend. And it's setting out their relationship or their contrast between the two. The use of quotes just links it to the text very lightly, but this is enough to link it to the text. So here it is looking at both whether the red-haired girl has advantages, and it's beginning to move towards talking about Rosabelle's anger. Hasn't mentioned the word anger yet, but it's beginning to move towards the reason why there is a tension between the two sides of this equation, the rich red-haired girl and the poor Rosabelle. Paragraph 2, give one reason why you agree with a quote. Rosabelle has a right to be angry because the red-haired girl and her boyfriend do not seem to understand how difficult it would be for her to afford their kind of lifestyle. So this is saying that she or he does partly believe that Rosabelle has a right to be angry. And the reason for that is that they don't seem to even know that other people around them may find the things that they find easy to buy and almost don't even think about the cost, that they would find that deeply unaffordable. The girl glanced at Rosabelle laughingly as she asked for a fancy, expensive hat. They seemed to be flaunting, which means showing off their advantages, such as the suggestion that they might have been in Paris last week. The contrast with Rosabelle's poverty hits her when the girl suggests that the hat suits you, because she would never be able to afford it, and that makes her angry. So now we have the student here is actually going out on a limb and saying why she or he thinks that Rosabelle becomes angry, and why the redhead girl and her boyfriend have actually caused some of that anger. It is that contrast between wealth and poverty. And when she realizes it, when she can see it in the unfairness of it, that's what makes her angry. She's also suggesting that in some ways the red-haired girl might even be being a bit mean to Rosabelle. You know, glanced at Rosabelle laughingly when she asked for the fancy, expensive hat. And that they're flaunting their advantages. They don't just have these advantages, they're sort of showing off because of the suggestion that they've been in Paris. Now, it's quite a well-constructed paragraph. But remember I said there are no marks in this exam on questions 2, 3, and 4 for the way it's written. But there are problems with this paragraph. There are inaccuracies. Can you see anything wrong with what the student has written in this paragraph? Anything that's wrong or anything that may not be fair?
I think I'm not agree with this that they might have been in Paris last week. I don't know what
Yes.
they.
Yeah, you're right.
Yes, this
There's
is
nowhere.
not about
Yeah.
Paris. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, there's nowhere in the text that says they've been in Paris.
Yeah.
Paris is mentioned, but do you remember what it was about? What was the mention of Paris about? It's quite difficult because we can't have the text open at the same time. But what the text actually says is that the girl's eyes, the green of her eyes, reminds her of through Rosabel's eyes, it reminds her of the green color of the ribbon that the shop had bought from Paris last week. This luxurious ribbon had come from Paris. So it's actually the ribbon that came from Paris last week. There's no suggestion that the redhead girl and her boyfriend have been in Paris. So that is just a misreading of the text. It's quite easy to do a misreading like that, but they've put it into the answer and they will be marked down for it. The other inaccuracy is with this use of the quote, glanced at Rosabel laughingly as she asked for a fancy expensive hat. That makes it sound like that the girl asked for a fancy expensive hat and was almost laughing at Rosabel because she wouldn't be able to afford such a lovely fancy hat. Is that true? Is that, and those words do come from the text, but is that what it's about? Does anybody remember the bit where she looks at Rosabel laughingly? Kaiser?
It's made up.
It's not
What?
made up. It is.
So
That quote does happen, but it doesn't happen because she asks for a fancy, expensive hat. It happens because the man, the boyfriend, is a bit of a silly fellow, and he says, "Oh, you need a lovely hat with a great long feather that you can wrap right round the top, and then comes down under your chin and ties up under your chin. Do you have a hat like that?" And it's such a stupid thing to say that Rosabel, the redhead girl catches Rosabel's eye and looks amused. It's like a moment between them where they go. Basically, they're saying, "Oh God, what are they like?" You know, what a silly thing to say. She's having a laugh at the boyfriend's expense and sharing her amusement with Rosabel. You know, men, what do they know? It's that sort of moment. It's actually a point of connection between the two girls. And it's quite the opposite. It isn't her laughing at Rosabel, it's her sharing a moment of humor with Rosabel. So I think this is an unfair use of a quote. It is a correct quote, but it's being used to suggest that the red-haired girl is being fairly mean to her about her being able to afford a fancy hat, and it's not true. So I think that these two errors in this paragraph will mark this answer down. So you have to be careful when you're using quotes that you use them to back up a point that is justified by that quote. You know, you can't just bung a quote on if it actually really doesn't prove what you're trying to say. It will be something that the examiners will pick out. And likewise, be careful that you read carefully enough that you don't actually just put something in that shouldn't be there. So the third paragraph, however. Now, starting with however suggests that this is going to be where the student is going to contradict themselves or is going to talk about partially disagreeing. So up to now, it's been two paragraphs of agreement. Now it's going to be a paragraph of some disagreement. However, I think some of Rosabel's anger is harder to agree with because, so the explanation is coming after the because. It seems to be due to simple jealousy. She observes the girl's beautiful red hair and how her boyfriend is so well dressed. The word so here shows how much she is taking notice of him and suggests how much she might want a boyfriend as well dressed as he is. When the girl says that the hat suits Rosabel beautifully, although this makes Rosabel very angry, the reader might feel the girl is just trying to be kind. So this gives an alternative impression of what's going on between Rosabel and the red-haired girl. Rosabel may be angry, partly or in total. It's not, because the previous paragraph suggested that Rosabel was angry because she sees the poverty, the difference between the poverty and the wealth. And that could be true up to a point, but maybe some of Rosabel's anger is just down to simple jealousy. And if it's simple jealousy, is that justified? Is it ever really justified just to be jealous? And maybe that's her fault rather than the red-haired girl's. So we look at the things that she might be jealous of, the beautiful red hair, the so well-dressed boyfriend. And these are fair points. And when the girl says the hat suits her beautifully, it's reasonable to believe that that is meant kindly. That the red-haired girl is not trying to be mean. She's actually being nice to Rosabel. She's giving her a compliment. It might make Rosabel angry because she's so jealous of her, but that's not her fault. So you can see how that is now disagreeing with the statement in the question, that the anger is partially unjustified because of jealousy and then a different interpretation of the intentions of the red-haired girl. That's a nice, much better paragraph, and it actually does turn it around. It's quite a sophisticated reappraisal of the reasons for the anger and the motives behind the red-haired girl and what she does. So then the optional conclusion, putting in your own ideas or knowledge. So this writer has chosen to go with the Marxian perspective, the political reading based on the class system. Let's see how it works. I agree that the red-haired girl has many advantages in life that Rosabel does not. The writer shows that Rosabel is unhappy about this in her flashback from line 19. From a Marxian perspective, the story shows the class system at work in the early 20th century. The rich customers show no sensitivity to the fact that Isabel could never afford the things they can because she does not share their advantages. To this extent, she has a right to feel angry. However, I feel that she should feel angry at the class system in general and not the red-haired girl personally. She seems a kind person who is just ignorant of the conditions the shop worker lives in and therefore does not deserve Rosabel's anger. Now you can see how all the ideas that they've played with in the rest of the answer are coming into focus here around this idea, the political idea of the class system at work. And so using the Marxian perspective, the class system and where they are at different parts of that system. And they can't help where they are in that system. There was very little movement, either up or down. If you were born into the upper class, you stayed there. If you were born into the working class, you stayed there. We didn't really get a lot of social mobility in this country until after the Second World War. People being born working class and actually ending up right at the top, in some cases, or certainly moving into the middle class. That didn't happen back in the early 20th century. So Rosabel is stuck at the bottom and the redhead girl is up at the top but it's through no fault of their own. They didn't plan it. It's just happened to them because of where and who they were born to. But it does explain some of the justified anger that Rosabelle has. But it shouldn't be focused on the redhead girl. That's what the student is saying. So to an extent, she's right to feel angry because there is an injustice. But she should be angry at the system, not the redhead girl, because it's not her fault either. She's ignorant of the way that the working class live or why they're poor, and just as ignorant as the working class are about why it is that some people just seem to have all the money in the world. They don't understand the system. And yet it's asking us, the readers, to see what's going on there and maybe understand that what's being dramatized by the writer is an attack on the way that the British class system works to keep people down at the bottom, and maybe that they should be feeling anger and that they should be standing up for themselves and saying no, or maybe thinking about joining a political struggle against the injustices of that system. And so a political point of view on this story is being used to give a sharper reading of what is going on here. Do you see the benefit of trying to do that? And I think the examiners would appreciate that there. All in all, this is quite a good answer. It probably would get around about the 17 mark, which is very good for this question. 17. Can't go higher because of some of the misquotes and the mistake in paragraph 2, and because some of the discussion parts are a little bit muddled. It could be sharper by keeping, one idea in each of the paragraphs rather than mixing them as they went along. But I think that final paragraph really does bring it all together, and it works because their very slight knowledge of the class system in the history of the early 20th century helps to make sense of what goes on in that final scene in the story. Why is she angry? Well, you could say that she's just jealous of the redhead girl, or is it something to do with her, just for a moment, realizing where she is in this class system, that she is just a tiny part of, and most of the time she doesn't notice. But when the curtain goes up for a moment and you see the workings of it behind the curtain, it makes them angry because there's nothing they can do. They're trapped in it. Yeah. And I think that is a fair point. What do you feel about that as an answer, as a model for the sort of way to approach question 4? How does that all make you feel? You can see why that paragraph has to be at the end, because it is a summation. It brings it all together. The other paragraphs could sort of be juggled about a bit. Go on. Who's that speaking?
It's me, Paula.
Hello.
The paragraph at the end, how many points do you think that added on?
I think what it does is overall it brings it into focus. So it's not that if you just took that away, there would be, let's say it would go down to 12. It's the cumulative effect of it. So the ideas in that last paragraph just bump it up to a higher score level. So I think it probably is worth an extra 5 or 6 marks, which is a big whack. But
yeah,
if they weren't already around about the 10, 12 mark anyway, then if you just wrote that bit, you wouldn't get maybe that much, because you have to justify it with your examples and your discussion. There are other ways of doing it. You don't have to save it up for, those comments about the class system, for example, could have been dripped into the other paragraphs. And this shows her that she's on a particular point in the classes. You could have done that in each paragraph and spread it out, and then you wouldn't have needed that final paragraph. It's just, I think it's easier to put it all into one paragraph at the end, because it shows how those ideas mix with your overall answer. And I'm quite keen on showing to the examiners what you're doing by having them separate. But you could merge those ideas all the way through your answer if you wanted to. There are always different ways of doing things. So my intention tonight was to give you a clearer picture of what the question 4 on paper 1 requires and what it's looking for and how you might approach it. Now, do you think that that has given you some more ideas and understanding about what you should be doing on question 4 tonight?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Now, it could be that, great, that's good. It is a complex question, and I would suggest that you reread the chapter in your book, in your textbook on it. There are always a lot of videos on YouTube. If you put in into your search, AQA, always put AQA because you want the right exam board. But AQA, GCSE English, paper 1, question 4, you will find there may be 2 or 3 videos for you to watch, which will give you 10-minute tutorials. They're always worth watching. They'll do it differently to me. They'll do it differently to your regular tutor. The more different ways that you think about these questions, the better it is. So that's how you revise this particular subject. We don't do facts. There aren't any facts to revise, like history, for example. It's all about how do I answer those questions? And the closer you get to understanding exactly what the examiners want from a particular question, the better you will do on the exam. So I hope to see you all next week. If you need to come to do some more on the structure question, that's what I'll be looking at. But I'm going to say good night now because it's 8:30. Okay, so thank you very much for coming. Thanks for your work tonight, and bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Very
Bye.
much. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Good night.
See ya.